sky me, where brains go to broadcast.
Okay, let's unpack this. We live in an age, right, where there's just endless information. It's everywhere, just a click away. But how do you really know what to trust? Like, how do you cut through all that noise and find what's truly reliable, what's relevant for you? So today we're doing a deep dive into a really crucial skill for, well, for any curious learner, really, how to find and evaluate information in this kind of overwhelming world. Our mission today, pretty simple. Equip you with the strategies you need to be, let's say, a media-savvy information detective. Make your learning journey efficient, insightful, and, yeah, trustworthy.
That's exactly right. And, the ability to critically assess information, it isn't just for academics tucked away in some library. It's actually a vital life skill for everyone, really navigating the modern world.
Yeah.
So we'll explore how you can confidently navigate both print and digital landscapes. Make sure the knowledge you're building is solid, reliable, that it truly informs your understanding.
That's a crucial starting point. Definitely. And when we talk about building that solid foundation, I mean, where do we even begin? How do we categorize all this information out there?
Well, the very first step, the absolute foundation, is getting your head around the two main types of sources you'll bump into, primary and secondary.
Right, okay. So primary sources, these are your direct firsthand accounts or maybe original data. Think of them like being right there when it happened, the unadulterated source material. And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. If you're looking into something like, say, the First Amendment right to freedom of speech, well, the actual text of the First Amendment right there in the Bill of Rights of the U.S. Constitution, that's your primary source. It's the original document, untouched, direct from the source. Other good examples. Research articles presenting original findings, maybe a novel, historical documents like diaries or letters, autobiographies, even personal eyewitness accounts.
Okay, so that's primary. Then you've got secondary sources. These are kind of a step removed. They discuss or interpret or analyze. Sometimes they even summarize information that came from those primary sources.
Gotcha. So sticking with that First Amendment example, if I'm reading an article about, say, legal cases involving First Amendment rights, or maybe an editorial offering commentary on it.
Exactly. Those would be secondary sources. They're giving you an analysis, a discussion about the primary source. Other common secondary sources might be, magazine articles, biographical books, literary reviews, scientific reviews, television documentaries that analyze historical events, things like that.
Okay, so why does this distinction actually matter so much? Primary versus secondary?
Well, the real power of understanding this difference isn't just about knowing how removed you are from the original thing. It's about recognizing whose lens you're looking through. A primary source lets you interpret the raw data, the original text. But a secondary source, that's always going to be someone else's interpretation filtering it for you. And it's crucial for knowing when to trust something outright and maybe when you need to dig a little deeper yourself. For instance, say you're studying reality TV, you definitely want to watch the shows themselves. Those are your primary sources, right? But you probably also read a reviewer's critique or maybe a critical analysis of the genre. Those are your secondary sources, giving you that broader perspective. It's really about picking the right tool for the job you're doing.
That distinction really clarifies things. Okay, so we often think digital first these days, the internet feeling like this wild, untamed jungle sometimes. But let's not forget print. While we live in a digital world, print resources are still incredibly valuable. Sometimes they even have stuff you can't find online. So what are we talking about here? What are some of those physical hidden gems we should still be looking for in, say, a library?
Oh, absolutely. Print is still huge. When we talk print, we're looking at things like reference works. Encyclopedias, almanacs, atlases. They're great for getting a broad overview, a starting point. But remember, they're often pretty brief. Then you have nonfiction books. These can offer incredibly in-depth coverage, everything from general audience books to highly specialized scholarly works.
Okay, reference nonfiction books. What else?
And don't forget, periodicals and news sources. These are things published regularly, newspapers, popular magazines, and importantly, academic journals. These can range from stuff for a general audience to really niche publications. Then there are government publications. Think reports, legislation, statistics, like the census profile data, for instance. Very reliable, usually. And even things like business and nonprofit publications, company software manuals, or maybe a press release from an organization like the Sierra Club. These give specific insights, though, you have to be aware they often have a particular agenda or product to push.
That's a lot of physical material to potentially sift through. So this raises an important question. How do you efficiently find the needles in that print haystack? Where do we even start searching?
Right. Good question. The first step, really, is identifying strong keywords. These are your main concepts, the terms that will anchor your search. And here's a fantastic tip. Check out the Library of Congress website. It's id.loc.gov authorities. It's honestly a goldmine for finding broader terms, narrower terms, related terms for your topic. It helps you think like a librarian searches. For example, there was a student, Jorge, researching low-carb dieting. He used it to find terms like carbohydrates in human nutrition. Really expands your search toolkit.
Okay, keywords locked in. Then what?
So once you have your keywords, you'll use your library's online catalog, or maybe even the old card catalog if they still have one. Or you'll dive into specialized periodicals, indexes, and databases. Now, when you're looking at periodicals, it's super important to distinguish between popular and scholarly publications. Popular sources, like your daily newspaper or a mass market magazine, they're written for a broad audience, usually easy to read. Their aim is often just to inform, maybe entertain, sometimes persuade. But scholarly or academic journals, they're different. They're written for a much smaller expert audience. They assume you have some background knowledge. And their main purpose: to inform objectively. Their content is rigorously reviewed by other experts before it even gets published. That's the peer review process. That makes them far more reliable for deep research.
Yeah, that peer review process is a huge differentiator for reliability, isn't it? And look, if you're ever feeling lost navigating the library systems, I cannot emphasize this enough. Go talk to a reference librarian. They are honestly your secret weapon. They know exactly how information is organized in their system. They can give you great tips on using databases effectively and explain advanced search techniques like Boolean operators.
Yes. Boolean operators are like power tools for refining your search. They really help narrow things down. Think of and/or, maybe the plus symbol. Using that limits your results. So First Amendment anti-freedom of speech would only show articles that contain both those terms. You can use not or the symbol to exclude terms you don't want, like maybe diabetes not type 1 if you're only interested in type 2. Putting quotation marks around a phrase like morbid obesity tells the search engine you want that exact phrase, keeping your results super focused. And for really advanced searches, you might even use special symbols, wildcards like hashtag or dot or dollar, to find variations of a word, like diabet hashtag could maybe catch diabetes or diabetics. But just remember, the exact way these wildcard symbols work can vary a lot depending on the specific database or search engine you're using. So always check the help section if you're trying something fancy like that.
Okay, awesome tips. So we've armed ourselves for the print world. Now let's shift gears and talk digital, the internet. It offers this incredible, almost overwhelming wealth of electronic information. What kind of digital resources are we actually talking about here?
Oh gosh, it's everything these days, isn't it? You've got your online databases, ebooks, web-published newspapers, magazines, journals. Then there are industry blogs, audio recordings, video recordings, even online discussion groups. Think about everything from maybe those old CD-ROMs you might still find somewhere, all the way to university websites ending in .edu or the government's official .gov sites. It's just a vast, constantly growing ecosystem of information.
Right. But what's fascinating and maybe a bit scary is that while popular search engines like Google are incredibly convenient, they also come with some pretty significant drawbacks that you really need to be aware of. What are the biggest pitfalls we should watch out for?
Yeah, the convenience is seductive, but tricky. The biggest pitfall, I'd say, is that the results don't always show up in order of reliability. Not even close sometimes. You know, those user-editable online encyclopedias, they might pop up right at the top. The search engine itself isn't verifying accuracy. It's mostly ranking based on popularity, or how many other sites link to it, not necessarily scholarly rigor. Second, you often get just an overwhelming number of results, literally millions sometimes, and the really useful sites can get buried pages deep. It's easy to get lost. And third, and this is crucial, the search engine is not the source of the information. It just helps you find websites. When you cite something, you cite the actual source you found, never the search engine itself.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do we cut through that digital noise? How do we search efficiently online without getting drowned in, millions of irrelevant links?
Well, beyond using multiple specific keywords and those Boolean operators we talked about, your best friend is usually the advanced search option. Most good search engines and databases have one. You can use it to limit results by a specific time frame, like only articles from the last 5 years, or by language or country. You can often filter specifically for scholarly works, which is super helpful, or limit by file type, like if you only want PDFs. And here's a particularly powerful strategy. Limit your results by domain type.
Actively search for sites ending in .edu for universities or .gov for government sites. These domains often host objective, highly reliable information, and it's a great way to filter out purely commercial sites or less credible sources. And just a simple practical tip, use your browser's bookmarks or favorites feature. When you find a promising site, bookmark it immediately. Organize them. Trust me, your future self will thank you when you're trying to find that site again later.
That's a total game changer for anyone who's ever felt lost down a Google rabbit hole. Okay. But beyond articles and websites, print or digital, there's another really rich resource out there that I think sometimes gets overlooked, and that's other people. Using human sources, like conducting interviews, can give you firsthand information, perspectives that you just won't find anywhere else. Who should we be thinking about interviewing?
Exactly. This is a great point. You might consider interviewing experts like professors in the field you're studying, or maybe industry workers who have that practical, on-the-ground experience. Representatives from relevant organizations can also be fantastic sources. These individuals can often provide unique, really current perspectives, maybe even data that you simply won't find published anywhere.
That sounds potentially incredibly valuable, but it also sounds like it could be a bit intimidating, maybe. So this raises an important question. How do you actually get the most out of an interview? How do you prepare?
Yeah, it can feel intimidating, but planning is absolutely key to making it successful and less stressful. We want to contact the person you want to interview early on. Explain your purpose clearly why you want to talk to them. Prepare detailed, open-ended questions beforehand. You want to avoid simple yes or no questions because those really limit the depth of the conversation. Think how and why questions. Then, during the interview itself, schedule enough time so you're not rushed. And always ask for permission before you record, whether it's audio or video. Take careful notes even if you are recording. And be ready with follow-up questions based on what they're saying. Listen actively. If an in-person meeting isn't feasible, a telephone call or even an email interview can work fine. Just remember the basics. Be prompt, be courteous, and be really respectful of their time.
Okay, great advice. So let's say we've done all this. We've built our arsenal of sources, print, digital, maybe even talked to a few people. We've got this pile of potential information. But the real magic, and maybe the real challenge, starts now, right? Becoming that ultimate information detective. This is where your critical thinking has to kick into high gear. You need to ask two vital questions about every single potential source. Is this relevant to my purpose? And is this reliable? So, how do we start scrutinizing what we've found? How do we get relevance first?
Indeed. That scrutiny is where the real work happens. Let's break down how to assess both relevance and reliability. First, for relevance, you need to get good at skimming efficiently. You don't want to read everything in depth initially. For books, maybe read the dust jacket description, scan the table of contents, use the index to look for specific topics or keywords, flip through it. For articles, skim the introduction and conclusion. They often summarize the main points. Look at subheadings, any sidebars or boxes. Check for your keywords again. And journal articles usually have an abstract or summary right at the beginning. That's like a super quick way to gauge if it's even worth your time to read more deeply.
Okay, skimming for relevance. Got it. Now, the big one, reliability. How do we dive into trustworthiness?
Right, reliability. This is where we really put on our detective hats. And you have to remember, not all sources are created equal, not by a long shot. Think of it kind of like a spectrum of trustworthiness. On one end, you have your highly reliable sources. These are things like scholarly books, peer-reviewed journals, maybe reputable trade magazines like Smithsonian or Nature, government documents, official university websites. These generally have rigorous review processes behind them. Then, sort of in the middle, you have sources of varied quality. Things like news stories from established outlets, say the New York Times or PBS, or popular magazine articles. These can definitely be useful, but you need to be a bit more cautious. Fact-checking standards can vary, and they might not have the same depth or objectivity as scholarly work.
And what's on the other end of that spectrum? The stuff to be really wary of.
Yeah, on the other end, you've got your questionable sources, the ones you should generally avoid for serious research, or at least treat with extreme skepticism. This includes things like internet discussion boards, most blogs, and especially those free online encyclopedias or wikis that anyone can edit. They lack consistent control systems, So maybe use them as a starting point just to get a very basic understanding of a topic or find some initial keywords, but never rely on them as a final cited source in your own work. Talk radio, some biased TV news, personal websites, chat rooms, all fall into this category too.
So it's not just about what kind of source it is, book, article, website, but also how it was created and vetted. What else contributes to judging that trustworthiness?
Absolutely. Beyond just the type of source, you really need to evaluate the author's credibility and the publication's reputability. For an author, look at their credentials. Does their career experience, their academic background, actually make them an expert on this specific topic? For instance, having a degree in physiology doesn't automatically qualify someone to write authoritatively about, say, psychology. The expertise needs to match the subject. For the publication itself, consider its standing, its track record. The New York Times, for example, has a different reputation for fact-checking and reporting than maybe a local college newspaper does. And for scholarly articles, checking citation counts in academic databases can sometimes give you a rough idea of how influential or accepted that work is within its field.
That makes sense. Check the author, check the publication. What about hidden motives?
Yes, it's also absolutely vital to check for biases and hidden agendas. Bias is basically favoritism or prejudice. It can lead to someone presenting only selective facts, maybe misrepresenting quotes, or distorting information to fit a certain viewpoint. A hidden agenda is an underlying goal that isn't immediately obvious, but influences how the facts are presented. Imagine, for example, an article discussing the role of beef in a healthy diet. One written by a representative from the beef industry will likely present information very differently than one written by the president of an animal rights organization, right? Both might present facts, but their underlying goals promoting beef versus discouraging meat consumption will definitely shape which facts they highlight and how they frame them. Remember Jorge, the student researching low-carb diets. He found some studies that were sponsored by a foundation closely associated with the author of several popular low-carb diet books. That doesn't automatically mean the research is bad, but he knew he had to read those studies with a really critical eye. Understanding the potential hidden agenda might have influenced the research design or interpretation.
Wow, that's such a crucial point. It's not just what they say, but who they are and maybe why they're saying it. Does the age of a source matter too? How current does information need to be?
It definitely does matter, yeah.
Yeah.
But its importance really varies depending on the topic you're researching. For something fast-moving like, say, social networking trends or tech developments, you need very recent sources. Information gets outdated quickly. But for other fields, like maybe established education theory or historical analysis, foundational studies from decades ago might still be perfectly valid and essential. When you're looking at websites, always try to find the date it was last updated. That gives you a clue about its currency. And non-functioning links on a page. That can be a big red flag that a site isn't being actively maintained or updated. And hey, if you're really struggling to find current reliable sources on your topic, don't ever hesitate to ask your professors or a librarian for suggestions. They often know the key resources.
Okay, this is all incredibly helpful. So ultimately, when you're looking at any potential source book, article, website, interview, what are the few big questions, maybe the core principles, you should always keep rattling around in your head.
That's a great way to put it. Ultimately, I think evaluating any source really boils down to asking yourself 3 core questions. First, who made this and why? Really think about the author's expertise, their potential biases, any hidden agendas. Who's behind the information? Second, what's the evidence and is it sound? Look for facts. Look for documented sources supporting claims. Look for logical reasoning. Is it just opinion or is it backed up? And third, how does this information stack up against other trusted voices or sources? If you can't confirm the facts elsewhere, or if it wildly contradicts a large body of reliable research on the topic, you should definitely be suspicious. If you keep those 3 big questions in mind, who made it and why? What's the evidence? How does it compare? You're honestly well on your way to becoming a truly savvy information detective.
That's a really powerful framework. Simple, but covers so much. Okay, so you've done the hard work. You've found your sources, you've rigorously evaluated them, fantastic, but wait, the job isn't quite done yet, is it? You've got to organize everything. Trust me on this one. You do not want to be scrambling for publication details or page numbers at the last minute when you're trying to write something up.
Oh, absolutely not. What's fascinating here, or maybe just practical, is that establishing a system early for keeping track of your sources will save you just immense headaches later on. It seems tedious at first, but it pays off. For every single source you decide might be useful, immediately record all the essential bibliographical information. This creates what we call a working bibliography. Think of it this way. For any source you use, you need to be able to capture the who, what, when, and where of its creation. Plus, if it's online, how you accessed it. So that means, the author's name, the title of the work, where it was published, like the publisher, the journal name, the city when it was published, the year, maybe the full date. And for web links, you need the full URL and, crucially, the date you actually access the site because web content can change. Having that core information is basically your safeguard against accidental plagiarism down the line, and just saves future frustration when you need to cite things properly. You might even want to assign simple code numbers or abbreviations to your sources to make note-taking easier. And maybe consider using a specific citation style guide, like APA or MLA, right from the start as you record the info.
Okay, track everything meticulously. Got it. Now, what about actually taking notes from these sources efficiently? How do we avoid just, copying huge chunks of text or writing down absolutely everything?
That's key. Remember your goal. You're trying to find information that specifically answers your research questions or supports your main points. You don't need to write down everything. Be selective. One good strategy is to use clear headings to organize your notes. Maybe dedicate one note card or one section in a digital file to a single major point or idea and summarize it with a heading. Keep all your notes related to your project together in one file or notebook, physical or digital. That makes it much easier to see connections between ideas later on.
And how do we decide how to take the note? Like, when should we summarize versus quoting directly?
Great question. You'll primarily use three main types of notes: summarizing, paraphrasing, or directly quoting. Summaries are when you condense the main ideas of a larger section, maybe a whole article or chapter, into just a few sentences or a short paragraph. Use summaries for capturing broad concepts or the overall argument. Paraphrasing is when you restate a specific fact or idea in your own words and using your own sentence structure. It should still accurately reflect the original meaning, but it's not copied. Honestly, most of your notes should probably be paraphrased. Why? Because it forces you to actually process and understand the material deeply, not just copy it. Direct quotations, of course, use the author's exact wording enclosed in quotation marks. Use these more sparingly. They're best when the original phrasing is particularly lively, memorable, powerful, or maybe when the exact wording is crucial to your analysis. But don't let your notes become just a string of quotes.
That makes sense. Paraphrase most often. And beyond the type of note, what about keeping track of where it came from and ensuring accuracy?
Absolutely crucial. Always. Always maintain complete and accurate notes. Every single note you take should include a clear heading or topic label. It also needs the author's name, or maybe that source code you assigned, or an abbreviated title so you know which source it came from, and definitely the page number or the full URL if it's an online source. You must attribute every idea, every major fact back to its original source right there in your notes. That prevents confusion later. Use quotation marks meticulously for any direct quotes, and make it really clear in your notes which ideas are directly from the source, quoted or paraphrased, and which are your own thoughts, reactions, or connections. Maybe use brackets or a different color ink. And finally, always ensure accuracy. If you quote, copy it verbatim, exactly. Use ellipses correctly if you omit words, making sure you don't change the original meaning. Double check your paraphrases against the original text to make sure you haven't accidentally distorted the meaning or used too much of the original phrasing.
Wow, okay. That's a lot, but incredibly practical advice. So let's pull this all together. What does this really mean for you, the listener, trying to learn and understand the world? You now have, a pretty comprehensive toolkit, right, to navigate this vast sea of information, to distinguish the real gold from the glitter, and to build truly reliable knowledge for yourself. This deep dive, hopefully, has equipped you to be a more discerning researcher, a more efficient learner, and ultimately, a more confident learner, no matter what topic you're exploring next.
Absolutely. And maybe this raises an important question for you, the listener, to consider as you move forward. Knowing now how easily information can sometimes be skewed or misinterpreted or presented with a hidden agenda, how will you apply these kinds of critical evaluation strategies in your daily life? When you're consuming news, scrolling through social media, just encountering information everywhere, how will you work to ensure you're always getting the clearest, most objective view possible? We really encourage you to continue exploring, keep questioning, and critically engage with all the information you encounter, because really, the journey of discovery and understanding, it never truly ends.
Cascade me where brains go to broadcast. Cascade me, knowledge speaks, tuition sleeps.